So there was this prison that allowed the inmates who had good behavior to go outside of the prison walls and garden. They had vegetable gardens, flower gardens, all kinds of gardens. And this one particular inmate every day would wheel out a wheelbarrow full of hay. And the guard always felt like the guy was stealing something. He would always say to the inmate, listen, man, I've never been wrong. I've been a guard in this prison for over 20 years. And when my gut tells me someone's stealing, they're stealing. I know you're stealing something. What are you stealing? And the inmate would smile at him. The guard would look through the hay, pat him down. Never catch him stealing anything. This happened day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. This inmate would walk out with a wheelbarrow full of hay. The guard instinctively knew this guy was stealing something, but could never find it. It drove this guard crazy. So finally, the guard says to him, listen, I'm retiring tomorrow. I promise I will not report you. I will not get you in trouble. But I know you've been stealing. I know you've been stealing. Please tell me what you've been stealing. So the inmate looks at him and goes, wheelbarrows. Sometimes what we're looking for is right in front of us and we don't even notice it. And that happens with a lot of us. A lot of times as Christians, like, what does the Lord want from me? What's my ministry? What's my purpose? What's my calling? And you run around, and you're missing what's right in front of you. There's an old saying that marriage is like flies on a screen door. Those on the inside are dying to get out. Those on the outside are dying to get in. It's not biblical, but it's a saying. It's a worldly saying. And sometimes people that are married they don't realize that what their ministry is. And sometimes people that are single don't realize what their ministry is. But St. Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 that we should be content if we're married or if we're single. And it's kind of like, I'm old school, a little traditional. And maybe I'm a little bit biased. I don't know. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, to me, I think these dating sites, if I was single, I wouldn't use it. Honestly, even a Catholic dating site, I don't know. It just seems unnatural to me. I don't know why. I always say, don't marry the person you can live with. Marry the person you can't live without. There should be passion. Today's day and age, everything is like, oh, well, economically, this would be good if we get married, or for, this would help us out, and they no, marry the person you're crazy about, man. So again, I'm not saying if you're on a Catholic dating site to get off it. That's just my personal belief, and I could be dead wrong. I could be dead wrong. I actually know a couple in my church that have a beautiful marriage. You could tell they're in love with each other, and God uses them. They're involved in ministries together, and God uses them in a powerful way, and they met on a Catholic dating site. So I'm not saying to get off it. I'm just saying, personally, if I was single, I would just let it happen. If it didn't happen, I would believe that God wanted me to stay single. That's just my personal belief. But if you are married, that's your ministry. I had Dr. Scott Hahn on our show, and he said the most important church is the domestic church. The domestic church means the home. So goes the home, so goes the church. So goes the church, so goes the nation. And he's right. He's 100% right. So get the domestic church right before you run around and try and help everybody else. Get your own house in order. That's why St. Paul says, leaders of the church shouldn't even be leaders if their kids are unruly. You know, make sure you get your house straight, you know. And it's a deep calling. It's impossible to do what we're called to do. It's impossible. Wives are commanded to submit to their husbands as to the Lord, and husbands are commanded to love their wives as Christ loved the church. That's even harder. And to be willing to die for them. But like we heard yesterday, we can do nothing apart from Christ. But like my priest said so powerfully yesterday, we can do all things through Christ. And marriage is a sacrament that gives us grace. That means it gives us supernatural power to do what we're commanded to do. Jesus wouldn't tell us to do something if he wasn't going to give us the ability to do it. You know, so what does it look like? You know, most of us don't live in a country where we're going to have to die for our wives or die for our faith. But I remember hearing a story on Focus on the Family years ago of a man who was madly in love with his wife, madly in love with her, beautiful trophy wife, as he called her. And then she got this dreaded disease, and she was paralyzed from the neck down. And this man took his wife everywhere he went. He went shopping. He carried her like a little baby, like an infant, and placed her in the shopping cart with pillows and made her comfortable. And people would look at him and laugh at him and make fun of him. And he didn't care. He didn't care. He would take his wife to the movies and have to carry her in like a baby and sit her beside him. This man loved his wife like Christ loves the church. And he didn't physically die for his wife, but he died to himself. And if you're not willing to make that kind of commitment to a woman, then don't marry her, because Jesus commands us to love our wives like Christ loved the church and gave himself up for us. But that's a very rare thing that happened. That was a very rare disease. So most of us ain't going to have to make that choice. But we have to be willing to put our wives first. We have to be willing, like Christ, the Bible commands us, the church commands us, to love your wives like Christ loved the church. And wives, you have to be willing to submit to your husband as to the Lord, and then it becomes something beautiful. You see in the Bible, Priscilla and Aquila, this couple, they're not mentioned a lot, but when they're mentioned, they're highly esteemed. St. Paul always, in several places, said, send my greetings to Priscilla and Aquila. In one part, I forget where it is, he says, send my greetings to Priscilla and Aquila. They stuck their neck out for me. They took Paul in and risked their lives taking him in. Another part says that this couple heard Apollos, this fiery preacher, and they said, man, this guy had like the gift of preaching and evangelization, but he didn't know too much. He was new to the faith. So they brought him in and they discipled him. They taught him more about the faith. And so that's your ministry, is your family. But out of it, you can do other things. I'm not just saying just, go home every night, provide for your family, and provide for your families. Men be men, I just read something this morning that struck me, that in 1950, 96% of men were working full-time, or were working. It didn't say full-time, I just assumed full-time. Today, only 86% of men, and these are men like ages 20 to 50. I know some, there's people with disabilities, and, I know some people feel bad they can't work. I'm not talking about that. I'm just people choosing not to work. There's like 14% of men choosing not to work, and that's weak, man. That's soft. That's not, God's calling us to be the man of the house, to provide for your wife and children. But if you're not married, St. Paul said it's better not to be married, because you can do so much more. Because when you're married, you're split. Your allegiance goes to your wife and to the Lord. You got to provide for your wife. You got to provide for your children. But if you're single, you could be totally focused on the Lord. In fact, when Jesus was telling the apostles about marriage, and he was giving it to them straight, like basically, can't leave for no reason. Man, you can't leave your family for nothing. And the apostle says, like, who would want to get married then? And then Jesus went on. This is in Matthew 19. He said, well, some people are forced to be eunuchs, and some people choose to be eunuchs. It's a gift for those who have ears to hear. Listen, not everybody has that gift. Rich Mullins, the late singer, he was a Christian artist, saying, "Our God is an awesome God." A lot of great songs. Passed away. Before he died, he was living with some monks. He was converting to Catholicism, and he took a vow of celibacy, and he took a vow of poverty. These Christian artists make a lot of money. He was making a few million a year, but he just took $12,000 to live on. He figured he could live on $12,000 because he was living in a monastery, and the rest he gave to a Native American reservation, to the people that live there, because he's seen their poverty. So if you're married and you got children, that's your ministry. Like I said, other things could come out of there, but that's your main ministry. Focus on getting that ministry right. If you're single, don't be, trying getting on websites, trying to get married. I mean, Paul said, if you're burning with lust, get married so you don't sin. Of course, if you're going to commit, fornication because you're not married, get married. Then get on a Catholic website, but make sure you find a woman that feels the same way about sex as you too. Otherwise, you're in a tough situation, because, you know what I'm saying. But if that's not an issue, ask the Lord what he wants you to do as a single person. If you're a man, maybe he's calling you to the priesthood. We need more priests, If you're a single woman, maybe he's calling you to be a nun. Or maybe he's just calling you to just be present in prayer every day, in daily mass and in adoration, praying for the church. That's the most powerful gift you could do, is pray for the church and pray for the world in daily mass and adoration. So my point is, it's between you and the Lord. I can't, don't go by what I do, but look to the scriptures, look to the church, and ask the Lord, what's my ministry? It might be the wheelbarrow right in front of your face that you see every day, and you're looking all over the place. So, let's get the basics right, and, let's go from there. God bless, and stay Catholic.